Hey guys, how's it going? JP here, JP's World of Wrestling, and this video is going to be kind of a serious one, which I never really meant for this channel to be, but it just dawned on me today that today's the 22nd anniversary of 9/11, and I just did a video where I previewed some Nintendo 64 wrestling games, and I'm going to upload those, or I'm going to upload that video, and that's going to be a fun one, but I just wanted to come on here and talk about it because everybody kind of remembers where we were. I remember where I was. I had just come home. I was just a couple weeks removed from my summer job. And my summer job, before my summer job, I had just gotten out of Job Corps. But for the summer, I went and worked with Joe and his family at this Christian youth camp in Central Oregon, where we facilitated a lot of Assemblies of God youth groups for their summer camps. And we had other groups besides Assemblies of God, but it was mostly Assemblies of God. And, there was a lot of, fun things that happened that summer. It wasn't really a terrible summer. Nothing really dramatic happened to me. It was a good summer. I worked my job. I had a little bit of trouble acquiring my lifeguard license, but it turned out okay. I got my certification, became a lifeguard, and facilitated recreation that summer. Did a little bit of turnover work and a little bit of kitchen work, but mostly it was recreation. But when I moved out there, uh, I took everything I owned, even though this was just going to be a temporary thing, a few months. I still took everything I owned, which means that Joe, when he came to pick me up, we loaded everything I owned in the back of this pickup truck, this company pickup truck, drove it up to the camp, and I had my own living quarters, and I set myself up as if I was going to live there, even though it was only going to be a few months. But eventually I did live there, but that was later on. This was just going to be temporary. So I took everything I owned, which included a entertainment cabinet, a TV, and all my video games and a DVD player. I had, you know, I had a cool setup. So when that summer was over, I moved back to Portland, and since there was no room in my bedroom for my entertainment cabinet, I set it up out in the living room next to the family's entertainment cabinet. So we had an entertainment cabinet and my TV right next to the family entertainment cabinet and TV, so that when my parents were watching TV in the evenings, if they were watching a show that I didn't really want to watch, I could just play video games on my TV, and they didn't really care as long as the sound was down. So on that morning, I woke up and I went into the living room, and my dad was there, and which I thought was kind of weird because usually he was at work, but he pointed to the TV. He's like, "Hey, you got to see what's going on." So we turned on the news, and there was all these. They showed all this footage of all these terrible things happening, all this horrible stuff, this chaos, and all this death, destruction going on, and I it just kind of I didn't know what to think. My mind was kind of glued to the TV, like, oh my goodness, what in the world? How could this be happening on American soil? How could this be taking place? But it was, and I just couldn't help but to think, oh man. And I felt kind of bad, not only because of what was going on, because the people were dying, but my dad and I had a trip to Disney World planned just like another week. And so we were kind of thinking, oh, this is probably going to put a damper on our trip. We did end up going. We lost a day because the airline, like we had a layover in Houston, and would have went from Houston to Orlando, but our flight from Houston to Orlando was canceled. So we would have been able to get to Houston, but we would have had to spend the night in the airport in order to get to Orlando. So we did end up going, but we only stayed for one day, which if you've ever been to Disney World, that's really not enough time. So me and my dad tried to make the most of our trip. We went to the Magic Kingdom, and we went to Epcot. We tried to do it all in a day, as much as we could in one day. The hotel offered us an extra day for free, but my dad had to get back to work. So he said, "No, I'm sorry, I can't do it." So anyway, so it was all just surreal. I mean, I couldn't really process what was happening because it was all very serious and it was all just, my goodness. And I have to commend the WWF because even though I wasn't watching the WWF at the time, because that was during the Attitude Era, but Vince McMahon decided that the show must go on. So at the beginning of that SmackDown on a Thursday night, it was 2 days after 9/11. SmackDown began with all of the wrestlers standing in solidarity on the stage. Vince McMahon, who usually was wearing a business suit, was just wearing casual clothes, got on the microphone and said, "Despite everything terrible that happened a couple days ago, we are standing in solidarity as a country, and our president has told us to go on with our lives and keep moving forward. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to entertain you for the next couple hours, and hopefully your mind can be locked into what we're doing instead of what's happening on the outside world." And it was very patriotic, and I thought it was the right decision. So I have to tip my hat to Vince McMahon and the WWF at the time for going through with SmackDown. And I did watch that SmackDown. I didn't normally tune into the WWF in those days, but I did tune into that SmackDown. So, I mean, it was a horrible, horrible day that I will never forget. And I mean, everybody remembers where they were. Everybody remembers what they were thinking, and regardless of what you feel about what happened that day, regardless of whether or not you believe the official story about what the news reported, or if you believe there was something else going on there, it really doesn't matter. The fact is, people lost their lives, and it was a senseless loss of life. And I think that's the most important thing, is remembering the people that lost their lives that day. So this is just my own version of a 9/11 tribute remembrance video, or whatever you want to call it. I know probably only a few of you are probably going to watch it, but that's okay. This is just me remembering my thoughts of where I was mentally at the time. Because at the time, other than that, life was good for me. I had just come off a great summer of working at the camp for summer camps. I had just come off a great summer. I was in the process of trying to find another full-time job. Turns out because of what happened, the economy kind of wasn't very good after that, and I had a hard time finding a job for a whole year. So the next year, I actually ended up going back to the camp and ended up working there for a couple years. So year round. So in a crazy way, it kind of worked out good for me, but it was still awful, just absolutely terrible, and nothing like that. Like I said, that nothing like that had ever happened in my lifetime. I wasn't around for Pearl Harbor. I wasn't around for any of these terrible things that I heard about before I was born. But this is something that I remember, and I'll always remember. I'll never forget about it, and I'm sure that those of you that are watching that remember that were around when that happened, you'll never forget it either. So anyway, that's gonna do it. Now, I never really meant for this channel to be serious. I always wanted to be kind of fun and silly, just talking about wrestling or whatever, but I don't know. For whatever reason, I just felt the need to come on here and talk about this. So if it's too serious for you, if you don't want to watch it, that's fine. I had to come on and kind of share some of my memories and some of my thoughts about what happened that day. So anyway, that's going to do it for this video. So I'll see you next time.